All right, guys. So I interviewed the badass woman who deposed Trump and got her client, E. Jean Carroll, $83.3 million in compensation for his defamation. All right. This is the deal. Let's just back up. Robbie Kaplan. She's a longtime lawyer. She fought for gay marriage at the Supreme Court, and she has been taking on Trump over the last few years. And I've just had the privilege to get to know her and become her friend. And so we had this awesome conversation where we discussed, yes, her work with Jean Carroll, but also some other lawsuits that she has coming up targeting the Trump business that I think will be very important and we'll keep discussing in the election year ahead. So check out this interview. It's from a few months back, but it is so good. You'll learn everything you need to know about the lawyer that is taking on Trump, winning these suits, and finally getting accountability for that bad orange freak. We'll see y'all soon. Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Sunday interview. I'm your host, Tim Miller, and I'm here with my old buddy, my good friend, Robbie Kaplan. I told you guys on Wednesday that if we lived in a righteous world, if we lived in a righteous country, this would be the most famous lawyer in all of America. But maybe not for everybody who's listening. So I thought, Robbie, it'd be awesome if you just start by, kind of talking about what you do. You have a public interest legal firm, Kaplan, Heckler, and Fink. You had a book, Then Comes Marriage, How Two Women Fought For and Won Equal Dignity for All. We're going to get through your big cases. There's a ton to talk about, including your deposition of Donald Trump. But why don't you just start by talking to us about the, kind of the firm and what the idea was behind, this kind of public interest legal work.
Yeah, so I've been a litigator my whole adult life. My nickname in law school was Straight Through, because I was only a few people to plug your ass.
Did they know?
They didn't know.
Were they surprised when you came out?
A little bit. And so, but I had been a lawyer and then a partner a year earlier at a big New York firm called Paul Weiss. I'd gone to Paul Weiss because I wanted to litigate. It was the best litigation firm in New York. And I also was attracted to the fact that Paul Weiss had a very deep-seated commitment to public interest. And there was kind of a tradition at the firm of people like Arthur Lyman, more recently Jay Johnson and others, kind of going in and out of government service and going in and out of doing, really mainstream, really high-profile public interest matters. So, and I learned tons there. And it made me the lawyer I am today. Then what really happened, Tim, frankly, is Donald Trump got elected president. And I thought that there needed to be a focus on Donald Trump by lawyers who were not only committed to public interest, but who had a background in commercial law, in commercial litigation, because as we all know, Donald Trump was engaged in a lot of commercial litigation in his past. And I kind of had this crazy idea to create a law firm. Let me back up. I thought that I was going to go work for Hillary Clinton's Justice Department, and then I was going to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. That didn't happen. And then when the election
we all had
happened,
plans that kind of went awry back around then.
And so I had this crazy idea to start this firm, and I call it a new fashioned, old fashioned law firm because we're not solely public interest, and we have big, high-profile paying clients. I'm trying to think. Right now, I'm doing a case for Diageo, a liquor distributor. I have cases for Columbia University, cases. We represent big companies all the time, and rich individuals all the time. But combined with that practice, I thought it was very important to have a practice that was devoted to doing cases in the public interest. And we like to divide our practice about a third. A third being kind of commercial litigation for traditional companies and businesses, a third white-collar cases, which my partner Sean Hecker and his team do, and then a third what I call public interest. We really believed strongly that if you could apply the standard techniques of commercial litigation, kind of New York commercial litigation, to some of the activities that Donald Trump had been engaged in, that maybe you'd see some benefit, maybe you get your hand for some information that's never seen the light of day. I was right on the merits. I was completely 100% wrong on the timing. So we did bring those cases, but as everyone knows, Carroll was only recently tried back in May. And we have a huge fraud class action against Trump that isn't going to be tried. Well, I hope it will be tried starting January 29th.
Well, I want to get into the timing stuff with you too, because that's actually relevant to the criminal cases that he's facing. So we've got a ton of stuff to talk about there. But let's talk about the ones that you've worked on the civil side. People are, I see, more familiar with the E. Jean Carroll case and the win there. So I do want to get to that. But let's start with this other case that you're talking about, which is just for transparency, where we met. We've been talking about how to go after Trump on this case, me from the communication standpoint, you from the legal standpoint. Well, just tell people from the start, like, what this fraud class action case is, because I think it speaks to kind of the heart of what is horrible about Donald Trump that gets lost a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So at a certain point in time, people may know this from some other things that they've read. Donald Trump, essentially, it became impossible to continue his real estate business. And the reason for that is, or to effectively continue his real estate business. And the reason for that is, in order to do New York City real estate, you have to be able to borrow huge amounts of money. That's the only way New York real estate developers do their business. And Trump, because of his prior bankruptcies and his not great record with other banks, he couldn't borrow the kinds of money, the amounts of money that he needed to do to continue that business. So at a certain point in time, largely coincident with Celebrity Apprentice, which kind of fell into his lap, he decided that the way to make money, and he was right about this, was to essentially market himself. That's what Celebrity Apprentice was. That's what a lot of these other kind of cockamamie businesses that you had, Trump Steak, Trump Water, Trump University, that I'm sure people know about. And one of those money-making activities that he engaged in was to sell himself as a celebrity endorser. And he did that for an entity that still exists today known as ACN, or American Communications Network. It's a company based in North Carolina. It's a multi-level marketing scheme, known more colloquially as a pyramid scheme. And what that means is that in order to make money, if you engage in this, if you transact business with this company, you have to make the money not from selling any product like vitamins, or in this case, video phones. You have to make your money by bringing other people in to the network. That's the way you make money. The more people you bring in, the more money you make. So Trump embarrassed this company for about a decade period. He canceled his relationship or terminated his relationship only when he started running for president. And a couple reporters, one at the Wall Street Journal and another guy, kind of started asking questions. And he decided that wasn't probably a good idea for him to continue. But he made well over $10 million. This entity, ACN, markets itself to to struggling people, working class Americans, poor Americans, people who really want to pursue the American dream, at least as they understand it, but they don't really have the resources or the education to do so in any ways, obviously, that Trump has done. So they kind of got wrangled in to this ACN multi-level marketing scheme. Now, there's things that turn out to be super important about it. One thing is ACN brought people in through these kind of stadium-size convocations, almost like revivalist meetings, where hundreds and hundreds of people would come hear Trump in a stadium somewhere. He would speak, and he would get near universal adulation from the crowd, like insane amounts of cheering from the crowd. I happen to think it's not going to be directly relevant to our trial, but I happen to think that's where he became addicted to it. Like all the Trump meetings that happened after that, all the political things that he's supposed to, he became addicted to that kind of large stadium adulation through ACN. So he was their exclusive spokesperson for a number of years, exclusive celebrity spokesperson. He he recorded videos that were used consistently to bring other people in, and he spoke at these kind of stadium meetings. His lies ranged from just kind of what I would call just generic lies. This is a great company. I know business. I know real estate. This is a better investment than real estate. You can trust me. That kind of stuff. Yeah. To, I had a bunch of guys do due diligence on this company, and they looked at it, and they told me that it's great, one of the greatest investments you can make. To just flat out objective lies, like this company sold more video phones than any other company in the United States last year. Just demonstrably, flatly false. To my all-time favorite, which is people think I do this just for the money, but I do this because I really like the company. And so we represent a class of really working class Americans. Our lead plaintiff, one is a hospice nurse, and another one was a furniture delivery man. And they say that they were dubious about ACN, but they believed in Trump. They believed in Trump through Celebrity Apprentice, and they bought into it and lost their hats, their shirts and their hats, because of Trump. So that's the case. The only other thing I should say is he had this company on Celebrity Apprentice twice. One time for a bonus of a doubleheader, a whole hour of Celebrity Apprentice, selling these insane video phones. And one thing to know about the video phones is these video phones were being marketed at a time when Skype and other software like that was already available on your smartphone. So there was no reason whatsoever. And these were huge phones that looked like small computers. They had to be hooked to your phone. They had to be hooked into your electricity. And here's my favorite. You could only use the video phone if the person on the other end was also using an ACN video phone.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So
it would be funny if it wasn't so nefarious and sad. I want to hear your kind of assessment of his legal vulnerability on this. But to me, like in my area of expertise, I think this has been the big failing of the anti-Trump efforts to expose just how, like, the big lie before the big lie, the foundational lie about Trump was that he cares about the forgotten man and working people when he spent his whole life fucking these people over.
Yes.
That's like that to me is the foundation. And we tried to do a little bit of that in the 2016 primary, but to my frustration, it was a little bit too little too late, and not enough of the ads were focused on that. And I think the Democrats have done not that great of a job of making that case. And then it's harder once he gets in there. There's so many other things to talk about, so many other scandals. But so I think that this is important, A, because these people's stories are important, but B, because it goes to the heart of his message. So anyway, I'm wondering your thoughts both on that and the legal prospects of this case as it comes up around the corner.
Which is part of the reason I think he is able to do that, and the reason he gets all this support from people who think he's a huge success is frankly Celebrity Apprentice. I mean, Mark Burnett was brilliant at it. The show was brilliant. Even Eugene Carroll admitted on the stand that the show was brilliantly done. Yep. And we have the outtakes, actually, from the 2 episodes that ACN was on, and some of it will play at the trial. It's insane. It is literally insane.
In what way?
Because first of all, everyone who's participating in the show, from the celebrities to the ACN guys to Trump and his kids, they all know it's a scam. Right. So they're all talking off camera, knowing that this is a scam.
Right.
And there are some excerpts where he's, again, going to what I think is his addiction, he's like talking to some of the celebrities about, no one can get more people into a stadium than I can, Star Jones. Right. Can you get 5,000? It's crazy, though. And they talk in the video, in the outtakes of the video, about how they're all going to use this phone at Bulwark, and it was going to be really popular. They couldn't wait to get their hands on these great video phones. Suffice to say, I deposed various members of the Trump board, and that phone was never used. No one had ever seen it before. It was just all a big hoax. The other thing that was super interesting was we deposed some of the celebrities who were on the shows that, again, hawk these ACN video phones, including I think I could say just her name, Marlene Matlin, who actually, because she's deaf, knows a hell of a lot about video phones. Because deaf people obviously have to use video phones.
She's the one who's on West Wing. She's on West Wing.
So she provided some very interesting testimony about whether these video phones made any sense whatsoever for anyone. And again, I think a lot of that will come out at the trial. In terms of the prospects, I think they're extremely strong. And the reason is because it's all documented. All his lies are either in writing, on video, documented in plain English. I took it to this deposition twice, one in this case and one in Eugene Carroll. And in this deposition, for 7 hours, I just asked him questions in which he was locked in. Is this your signature? Is that you on the video? Who's the guy who you said did the due diligence? So he's locked in on everything. And it's hard for me to imagine a jury not being persuaded. I mean, the facts here are just overwhelming. If we could persuade a jury that was not exactly, as Dahlia Litwick said, an avocado toast eating jury in Eugene Carroll,
Right.
then I'm very confident that we could persuade a jury in this case where the facts are really, it's not he said, she said. It's all documented.
The E. Jean Carroll case was the one that had the one juror that was like a Tim Pool fanatic. Yeah, I've been talking about this, and because nobody ever brings this up. Whenever they're like, "Oh, it's biased juries in the deep state," I was like, "No, it's like regular people." Like this guy was a Tim Pool. I was a MAGA, kind of a lefty turned MAGA podcaster.
What's crazy about it is the judge in this case, who I obviously think did a great job, that for jury selection, he does it like speed dating, honestly. He goes around the courtroom and you have like 40 seconds with each juror. It's nuts. And he asks the questions, so you don't even get to ask anything. And this guy this is a crazy story, was wearing a white shirt, black pants, and a black blazer. And one of the questions Judge Kaplan asked him, where do you get your news? And everyone, including myself, including the court reporter, thought he said temple. That's what the transcript says. I actually thought he was maybe an Orthodox Jew because he was white. So I was like, oh, temple. And then I think someone from the Daily Beast, like 3 or 4 days later, figured out that he actually said Tim Pool.
Tim Pool.
Fair to say that we had a bit of a heart attack.
Yeah.
We asked the judge to strike him. The judge brought him in for questioning twice and was satisfied that he could be impartial. So we stayed on the jury, and it was a unanimous jury verdict. So he definitely voted our way.
That's amazing. On the deposition, so which deposition was second? Carroll. So did he remember you from the ACN deposition?
Oh, he did. Okay, I'm going to tell a story that's never come out before, but I think I can tell the story. So at the end of the ACN deposition, where he was very frustrated because he'd been locked in all day on this, really had nowhere to move. Clearly he and his lawyers have been talking about this, and immediately he started to talk, and someone said, off the record. So they made sure that the stenographer and the videographer had shut down the system. And he said to me, are you ready? You're obviously sitting down. Take a breath. He said to me, see you next Tuesday. Fortunately for me, I had no idea what that meant. So I looked at him and I said, what are you talking about, sir? I call him sir. So what are you talking about, sir? I'm coming back on Wednesday.
Why would you tell him sir? You're giving him another sir story to use. But anyway, okay.
We get into the limo, not the limo, the black car to take us back because we had to have security. And my associate said to me, Robbie, do you know what that means? And I said, what are you talking about? And they said, see you next Tuesday means, cunt. It was a popular term, Tim, that Roger Stone popularized about Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
I'm very glad, honestly, that I didn't know what it meant because I stayed calm in both depositions the whole time. Had I understood what that meant at the time, I'm sure I would have lost my temper.
So then when he sees you, the next step...
Say all like calling me, find it on the record. And unfortunately, it wasn't
off the record. I think I'll trust your word over his on that one. And so then when he does see you the next time for Jean Carroll, what was his mien like? I mean, was he like this fucking woman again? Like what was he thinking?
More aggressive, even more aggressive if possible for me. So a lot of police said in that position was attacked by me. You're a disgrace. You're a hack. At one point he said, I'm not his type. He's sorry, he didn't want to offend me, but I wasn't his type either. Things like that.
No problem there, sir.
I'm not, no, I wanted to say thank you. I did not. I really stayed calm. I mean, you know me, Ted, I'm not known for my, Zen-like qualities. No. But I really stayed calm. And when he would do that, I would kind of look up at him and I would say, are you done yet? Because I have another question I want to ask. And then it would start all over again.
Kind of how I treat my toddler during after a tantrum. Like, are you finished stamping yet? Okay, so we moved to the Jean Carroll case. So now that we're going after him again, what is the status of that case right now?
So that case,
well, obviously there's been obviously there was a result, but
everybody is done. We don't have to cover the issue of whether he sexually assaulted her again. That's over.
Yep.
But because of some complexities having to do with the first time that he defamed her, he was still president. Right. And that was this whole host of complicated federal issues. That case was delayed. It went to DC Court of Appeals and then came back. The total That's what I'm talking about, the court's not moving so quickly. And so all that's left to do is to decide what were the damages to E. Jean Carroll for the first time that he defamed her, which was in June 2019. Those are the highest damages in the case because that's when the whole thing came out. That's when he was president. That's when there were, I think, something like hundreds of millions of impressions on social media. And so all that a jury has to do in that case, it should take more than 2 days, is decide what the damages were for that first defamation.
Got it. I want to go back to that deposition with Carroll. For the people who aren't familiar, I'm sure some people saw this in the news, but like the epic moment from that deposition is when he looks at a picture of her who he said is not his type, and he thinks it's Marla Maples. So just walk us through how that came to be and what is happening in your head as he just steps in this entire pile of shit.
The crazy part about it is I can't say that I've never tried to trick a witness in a deposition. That would not be true. I might have done that to my home. But that's not what this was. We were talking about when the excerpt of E. Jean Carroll's book came out in New York Magazine in the summer of 2019. And he said, he volunteered that he'd seen a photo of him with her. And I said, oh, okay. I said, I think I have that photo. And I asked my colleague, and I pull it out. And I say, is this the photo that you were just referencing? And that's when he literally, independently, not in response to a question, he looked at it and he pointed to it and he said, oh, that's Marla. And I said something like, what did you just say? I was so shocked. And he said, Marla. And then Alina Haba, his lawyer, immediately jumped in and corrected the record. But here's the thing that hasn't come out, which is great. I think it had a big impact on the jury. Then he was classic cop, because once Alina had clarified for him that it was not, in fact, Marla Maples, his second wife, it was E. Jean Carroll, he said, oh, well, I guess the photo's just very blurry. So it's classic Trump. This is not a blurry photo. It's like a Getty Images photograph. The jury saw the photo. And at the closing, I said to the jury, that's classic Trump. That's what he does. He will lie about anything, anywhere, at any time, if he thinks it's to his advantage. He knew he made this mistake. It dawned on him that he made this mistake, so all of a sudden, the photo was blurry. That was better than the original mistake in certain ways.
I mean, the whole like element of it is like, how does he find himself in this situation that he, it's like the compulsive liar. It like reminds me of, I had a little phase when I was in middle school, I could admit to listeners, where sometimes I would just lie to my mother about things. She'd be like, what grade you get on the test? I'd be like, A. And I'm like, I know that in 2 weeks she's going to say it, right? But like, I couldn't help myself, right? I had a brief compulsive lying phase as a middle schooler. He has that at like age 76.
Correct.
And it's like, and that's what this was. I'd love to say it's like dementia and he's losing his mind or his glasses or something, but that is it. He just has like this contrarian, compulsive lying element. How'd you think about dealing with that as deposing him twice?
For me, it's so fun. And I think maybe it's probably one E. Jean Carroll case of this because he just can't help himself. 2 other good examples from E. Jean Carroll. One, I asked him if he ever gone to Bergdorf Goodman, which, by the way, is 2 blocks away from Trump Tower and literally across the street from the Plaza Hotel that he owned for many years. And so, I asked the question, and you can see the line it's kind of like a tornado. You can see it gather junk as it goes on. So first he says, no, maybe a little bit, but not very often. Then he says, no, now that I think about it, maybe my wife shopped there, but I never shopped there. And then he says, oh, no, I never went into Bergdorf Goodman. So we put on the stand at trial 2 former Bergdorf Goodman employees from that period in time, both of whom, one of whom saw him outside the store, and one of them, I think the other of whom was aware that he shopped at Bergdorf Goodman. Yeah. So again, we didn't get it into evidence, but in one of his books, with the judge delighted in at the end, I think he thought like enough's enough, Robbie, like I said. But in one of his books, he says he recommends that people buy people gifts from Bergdorf Goodman. So again, he just can't help himself.
Well, he probably didn't write the books, so it's just like it's just like lie upon lie. And anyway,
the other thing that really helped us is there's a famous interview that ended up being very important. Let me back up. So E. Jean Carroll at this point in time had a TV show on Roger Ailes' first network called America Talking. The show was filmed at Fort Lee, which is where they had studios. And her show was broadcast it was live I think at 4 p.m, and then they ran a rerun every night. I think she was on at 10, and Roger Ailes, who had his own talk show, was on at 11.
Okay.
So at his deposition, I say, were you friends with Roger Ailes back at this time? It was 1996. He said, no, only become friends with him in very recent years. Then at trial, we showed the video of Donald Trump being deposed by Roger Ailes in November 1995, so it's pretty soon before this happened. They're talking about their killing. It's very clear that they, at least on camera, are good friends.
So being deposed, being interviewed on the show. On the talk
being interviewed
show.
on the show, excuse me. Being interviewed on the show. And we show it to the jury. And we say he didn't know Eugene Carroll. Of course he knew Eugene Carroll. He knew because he was at the studio. He knew because when he watched this show at home, these were the old days, he had to turn on the TV to that channel.
Yeah,
and if he was like a little bit early, he would see Eugene Carroll.
How is Eugene doing, I guess, before we move on for that? I would love to hear just kind of her mindset through all this. What a brutal process.
And then brutal, which she is literally one of the most courageous people I've ever met. She's doing great. She really said afterwards that she feels that way. She got her name back. She is kind of the incredibly charming, brilliant, eccentric writer you would expect her to be, and she just goes on and on doing what she does. It's amazing.
Oh, that's good for her. Okay, I want to get into some of the other amazing stuff that you've done. You started the firm. I think I have this right. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like basically the first big public interest case you took on as you were leaving was this lawsuit after the Charlottesville Unite the Right rally,
Correct.
And it was pretty creative. It had. I guess let's put it this way: had you not done it, like maybe nobody would have done it. Right, like it's not as if that there was somebody coming to you and saying, "Hey, we need to do this lawsuit." It was like you identified this as saying that these guys had. Well, you just tell the story. Talk about how you got into the Charlottesville lawsuit.
Well, the Department of Justice, namely the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, which was started after in the 1920s to deal with these very issues, should have done it. Okay? Jeff Sessions was on the AG. Call me crazy. I didn't think he was going to do anything about it.
Yeah.
And so it thought to me like someone needs to do something about what is obviously a terrible, violent conspiracy that violates the Civil War, the statutes that implemented the Civil War amendments. So we dusted off. We were the first people to dust off the KKK Act, which hadn't been used successfully since the 1950s. They'd been used for kids who went on buses down south and then were killed. There have been a couple cases that were successful then, but it hadn't been used successfully since then. And we dusted it off and brought a civil rights conspiracy against the leaders, the organizers, and then a couple of the foot soldiers, including the guy who drove into the crowd who engaged in the violence in Charlottesville. And at the time, this is what's so crazy about it. At the time, I had no idea of two things. One, that I was starting a vogue for bringing cases under the civil rights statutes. A lot of the laws, the cases today, including the Trump prosecutions, are brought under those statutes. A lot of the January 6th cases as well, the civil cases.
This is kind of an important point. Let's just pause there for a second. So do you think that I mean, obviously it had a direct impact on that, right? I mean, like these guys are kind of searching around for statutes under which they could charge Trump for these like obvious crimes, but that are unprecedented in a lot of ways. And so the fact that you were successful in Charlottesville, do you think that there was a direct line on using this statute?
Yeah, I think it did. And some of the earliest suits, there were civil suits brought against January 6th, and those were all under similar statutes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I did. So there was that. And then B, the fact that the defendants in our case, for the first time it became famous, it probably wasn't the first time, but for the first time, were able to use social media to organize a violent conspiracy nationwide, obviously also ended up being a very big deal later, as we saw on January 6th.
Right.
At the time, I had no idea. I was hoping it was going to be a one-off. I didn't think this was going to be a pattern. But we did see in Charlottesville the ability. Well, let me back up. After these laws were passed, if people wanted to violate these civil rights statutes, they would don a white robe and a hood, and they would go into the forest in Alabama or Mississippi, and they would lynch African Americans. And today, you don't need that. All you need it was the ability to get on your internet, get on Discord or one of these other websites with a hashtag. You have anonymity by definition.
Yep.
And you don't have to be local people in the forests of Alabama. These guys came from all over the country.
Right.
The ability of people to engage in this kind of conspiracy today, I'm not saying that was anyone's intent with social media, but using social media is petrifying. And again, same thing on January 6th.
Yeah, it's interesting. I interviewed the head of the South Carolina Republican Party a couple of years ago. He's was one of the remaining, too conservative for me, but normal types, not a QAnon crazy. And this was something that he observed, right? When I was like, how has the South Carolina Party gone so nuts? And he's like, because these guys can organize. He's like, it'd be two people, he's like, we always had these guys. There'd be two people in Spartanburg and two people in Columbia and two, right? But now it makes it a lot easier for them all together. And he observed that's how they were taking over local parties in South Carolina. So anyway, the Charlottesville case, so essentially you sue the leaders and a couple of the foot soldiers in this. What do you think impact that had? Because that part now, Oath Keepers, there have been other groups that have still, that still exist. Obviously, domestic extremism on the rise. But that specific Unite the Right, alt-right, Richard Spencer thing really has kind of fizzled since then.
So,
yeah.
Since then, you see lone wolves, unfortunately. So you'll see people like the guy in Pittsburgh, things like that, Poway, et cetera, that are terrible. But they have not tried to engage, at least as far as I'm aware, since then, of kind of this mass violence that clearly was the goal of Charlottesville, and they accomplished their goal. And I think it's because of the trial. I mean, we finally have verdicts, we're on appeal, but we're gonna bankrupt these guys. And to the extent they have any money whatsoever, we're going to take every penny they have, including Richard Spencer, who definitely has money.
Yeah, he's still popping around on social media. I see him sometimes. Like he's trying to rebrand a little bit, kind of as a soft Nazi.
Instead, he disavowed some of his earlier beliefs, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, bankrupting Nazis, that's a win. Getting Trump for sexual assault, getting some money out of him is a win. So that's pretty good. But the big, actually, I want to talk about the biggest win, I think, for us from a personal level, which was the Windsor case in front of the Supreme Court. But before we do that, before we get off Trump, I'm curious about just your legal expertise of the criminal cases. So we're looking at, the two Jack Smith cases, the Georgia case. The things that our listeners obviously care about is what you alluded to at the beginning, timing. Like, what is your just assessment? Just putting it outside or putting on your legal eagle hat for whether it's possible that we might get some kind of resolution or some kind of action between now and the Republican convention.
So I just took a big kind of intake of air. You didn't say, but look, I hope I'm wrong. But given the circumstances that I'm aware of, I think the case that has the best chance, may have the only chance, of getting to trial before the election is probably the Jack Smith January 6th trial. The Florida case, you have a judge who seems like she wants to slow roll things. You have all kinds of security issues that they're bringing up in terms of the documentation. That takes time. So I hope that's in certain ways the easiest case to prove. But unless you have a judge who's really moving to push it forward, that's going to be hard to get to trial before the election. Atlanta, there's going to take at least 6 months, maybe a year, fighting about where the case should happen in the first place. Trump's going to say it should be moved to federal court. That's going to take a lot of time.
I'm sorry, I thought federal court was biased. I thought DC deep state was biased, and he wanted in the states. That's only in certain cases. In other cases, he wants it in DC.
He moved E.G. and Carroll to federal court, which was great for us.
But that same thing. So that's going to take time in Atlanta. And the conspiracy, while incredibly compelling, is very complex. A lot of defendants. That's a big thing to try. January 6th, you have a judge who's very experienced, who moves things quickly, and you have a great prosecutor in Jack Smith. So that's where my hope is, but look, I hope I'm wrong. I've never so much wanted to be wrong in my life.
But the merits of them, I mean, let's just of the three, obviously there are different kind of views, but you feel like they're strong cases against him on the merits?
Every single one of them. I mean, I think Florida's open and shut. I don't know what his defense could possibly be there. It's and the fact that he was showing Iran battle plans to women at Bedminster is truly insane. The other two cases are more complicated, but it sounds like they have such overwhelming testimony, all from Republicans, that it's going to be very hard, I think, for him to put out much of a defense. And the one thing we still have in this country, and I sound a little bit Pollyannish. I don't mean to be Pollyannish,
I
but
love this.
the one thing we have is when you put facts forward in a court of law with the rules of evidence, where you can't lie, or if you do lie, as in Carroll, you can show the lies. I still have faith, especially from Carroll, but juries are going to follow the facts of the law. And so I think even if it's a jury that all voted for Trump, I still think the prosecutors have an extremely high chance of prevailing.
So on the Dumb and Dumber, so you're saying there's a chance scale. What do you think is the chance that he actually goes to jail from one of these cases?
I think his best chance of going to jail is the Atlanta case. The federal guidelines and the federal sentence for this stuff just aren't that severe. It seems to put a former president in jail is a BFD. And it may happen, but it seems to be harder.
So I shouldn't leave the champagne on ice, you don't think?
Yeah, I wouldn't leave the champagne. But I guarantee you that he's very scared of that.
Yeah.
For sure.
What do you think about one other thing on those cases? On the right, you're hearing now increasing, agita over going after his attorneys in the Georgia case, and all of the ramifications that go along with that. So as an attorney, has to make these choices. I was just curious what your thoughts are about that. I mean, about Jenna Ellis's exposure and Rudy and all those guys.
I guess my answer is there are attorneys and there are attorneys. Some people, most attorneys, I think, feel an incredible obligation to adhere to certain standards and to only do acts that are legal and only recommend that your clients do things that are legal. And most of the time, 99% of those time, those lines are pretty obvious and you know when not to cross them. And if the allegations in the Atlanta lawsuit and in the DC lawsuit are true, and I have to assume they are, those were not close questions. Those attorneys cross lines that a first-year law student would know not to cross. Why they did that, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not going to try to explain that. But it's not an attack on the attorney-client privilege or the attorney-client relationship. It's an attack on a group of people who got together and just decided to break the law. Jeff Clark, by the way, is long been one of my favorites because he's the guy who removed the Eugene Carroll case to try to stall it from state court to federal court on the theory that the government, the DOJ, should defend. He signed the original removal papers, the Westfall petition, so he's been on my radar screen for a long time. Okay,
so while we're on champagne on ice questions, the Clark, Rudy, Ellis, it seems like their exposure in Georgia is pretty real.
Very real. And especially everyone in New York has been commenting, especially all the lawyers. Rudy Giuliani, when he was U.S. attorney, he was famous for kind of reviving the RICO statute and using it against a whole host of people. The irony that's today what he's been charged with is I don't even have an adjective to describe it.
Yeah, so the craziest thing about that with Rudy is if in 2002 he had just flown to Sicily and retired and drank wine and ate pasta and greeted visitors who wanted to come kiss the ring, you'd have renamed LaGuardia after him. And here he is looking down the face of real jail time over a statute that he was famous for. Quite the story.
Why was he volunteered to go to the Ukraine for Trump? It's like he couldn't stand not to be in the mix. That's got to be it, right? It literally makes no sense.
Yeah, I think that the desire to be in the mix, which I've written about a lot, I think is a big part of it. Also, I think alcohol poisoning is probably not helping him. Okay, I'm going to lose you here, so I want to feel feelings. We know the result of the Windsor case, obviously, which has been good for me. I'm married and I have a child I took to kindergarten this morning. What I just kind of want to go back with you to when you met Edith and kind of what was the origin story of that case, and like how confident did you feel? And just tell us that, the dime store version of that story, getting to the Supreme Court.
It's talking about kind of the randomness and maybe not so randomness of life. And what happened is I got a call from a friend of my wife's who was a headhunter, did like legal headhunting, and who said, I know this woman, Edie Windsor. She had to pay a huge tax bill when her spouse, the Aspire, died, and she's been looking for a lawyer. The day groups have turned her down. Would you talk to her? When this friend of mine said that to me, I knew exactly who she was. It only came out after the case because we had put this in our briefs. But the reason I knew exactly who she was is flash backwards, 18 years. When I was in my third year of law school, and I came out of the closet, I was not so eager to come out of the closet, so I waited to the last possible minute.
I'm sorry, I'm not going to age you and say what year that was, but the last third year of law school is not too late. I'm about a redacted number of years later. I didn't come out till my mid-20s. Okay, so I think you did pretty good.
So what happened? My parents came to visit me in New York, but yet it was my bad luck that it was gay pride, and so they kind of had to wind their way through gay pride traffic to get to my apartment. My mom got to the apartment and started kind of bitching. What's with these dykes on bikes? What's with this? What's with that? I said to her, Mom, please stop. As moms often do. She continued. I said, please stop again. She said, why? Why do you want me to stop? Are you gay? I said, yes. And in the most kind of like a bad Jewish suburban soap opera, she literally walked to the corner of the apartment and started hitting her head against the wall. She's apologized for this.
I stormed out of Thanksgiving dinner, so we can do a whole separate podcast about coming out disasters and how stereotypical they were. So anyway, we can go ahead toe to toe.
My mom is apologized for 2 minutes, but this really isn't a criticism. I'm not forgiven. That's not an issue anymore.
Yeah,
but
same.
as you can imagine, I was feeling a little low that summer, and I started to ask around. I need to see who can I see as a psychologist who deals with gay issues. That's what he talked about. It then deals with gay issues. And I kept getting the same name. The name I got was Thea Spire. So I actually saw Thea Spire as a patient. I don't think I saw her more than twice because I was moving to clerk for a judge in Boston in the fall. And in those Leos, Thea was already paralyzed from multiple sclerosis. So she was in a wheelchair. So you met in her living room. And then during those sessions, she talked about eating. Here's the crazy part. I remember her telling me about this brilliant mathematician she was married to and how great their life had been together. Now, I understand now that she was saying it to me because I was so despondent at the idea that I could ever have that she decided to tell me to give me confidence. It was a good thing that she told me. But flash forward 18 years, and I get this call, and I call Edie Windsor, and she's like, okay, why don't you come over? And I said, okay, I didn't have to ask her where she lived. I knew exactly where she lived. I walked into the apartment. It was like going back to the scene of an accident, kind of. I was like, oh, my God. And I told her the story. He wasn't that interested in the story. She's like, let's talk about my case. I was like, fine. And that's how it happened. I thought that Edie would win her case, at least through the Second Circuit. I thought her chances were really good. Americans understand taxes. They really understand unfair taxes. And the idea that she would pay all this money just because she was married to a woman rather than a man seemed to me, that fundamentally unconstitutional, and I thought we'd prevail. But I didn't know at the time, I knew that one case would ultimately get to the Supreme Court, but I didn't know that was going to be our case. I thought we'd be done at the Second Circuit. Right. And it just so happens that that's the case they chose.
How?
Basically, what happened is the Solicitor General decided early that the Supreme Court should get involved. So he did this thing then that was very rare. Today it's not rare at all, called cert before judgment, which is where you ask the Supreme Court to decide an issue before it's gone to a circuit court. And again, they did it like once every 5 years, 6 years back then. Today it happens multiple times a session. But, and they wanted to get decided. Originally, they had picked a case out of California because our case was still at the trial court. We then got a decision from the Second Circuit that was on exactly the grounds that the Department of Justice thought were the right grounds. And so our case went from being number 4 out of 4 in the rankings to number 1. And that's why the Supreme Court, they followed the SG's recommendation and took our case.
Talk me through Victory Day. What was it like when it came down? Did you go get a margarita after? Just give me the full deal.
So we were in New York City. The Supreme Court does this. Most other countries' top courts actually tell people when their decision is coming down.
Right.
But why would they do anything that's that nice or less sadistic than ours? But they do not.
Right.
So they have these decision days in the summer.
It wasn't the last day? I assumed it would have been the last day.
It was, but it could have come down for like 3 or 4 days before that. So
Right.
3 or 4 decision days before that, we all got together in my apartment because it was a hot summer and had the best air conditioning. We all gathered around my dining table with our laptops on SCOTUS blog, refreshing, and let's see what's going to happen. Edie got very frustrated. At a certain point, Ari Levy's article in New Yorker says he said, fuck the Supreme Court, which she did say. And she was saying it about that. She was like aggravated that she didn't have a decision. Finally, it was the last day. She was like, I'm not even coming. I said, no, Edie, you're definitely coming. And we're doing the same thing again. So like a third or fourth time. And the minute we saw that decision was by Kennedy and that the dissent was by Scalia, we didn't even have to read another word. We knew we'd won. There's this great photo of it. We had a photographer there of complete insanity broke out in my apartment. I'm screaming. My wife is crying. And then Obama called a few minutes later to congratulate Edie from Air Force One. I think she hung up on him by mistake at least once. And then, like the rest of the day, I mean, he loved it. She deserved it and she loved it. She was kind of riding around the city of New York and I don't even know what celebrity to compare her to. Like, we would drive down the street, people would come up to the cars to touch her.
Little mini ticker tape parade type thing?
It was insane. And there was we had a big celebration at Stonewall.
What was the expectation? Like, you were worried it was going to be 5-4 either way? Was it just Kennedy, or what was your level of confidence?
Yeah, we thought it was 5-4 either way. We thought we had Kennedy. Well, our whole brief, everything we did was written to appeal like Justice Kennedy. Like we cited, he'd written all the gay rights cases at that point, so we could cite his own cases. But during the argument, the Chief Justice was particularly irked with me. I think it's fair to say. And we took that as a signal that he knew that we had Kennedy, that he realized that he was on the losing side. So we were pretty nervous, but
why was he? Was Roberts then? It was Roberts then. Still,
yeah,
right?
He voted. Yeah. He dissented.
Yeah. Why? But why was he irked with you?
Because he realized that we had Kennedy.
Oh, got it.
I think that's the way we read it. I mean, there's no way to know. It's like reading tea leaves, but that was our best guess.
Well, that's beautiful. I wish I was there with you. And we all, a grateful gay nation, thanks you. Okay, last thing. I had this is a pet one for me, and so I've never talked to you about this. But you guys also at your firm did the NCAA, kind of gender equity review, and a bunch of other stuff. And so I just kind of wanted to get your position from your standpoint. I'm of the view, I think that women's basketball in particular, but other women's college sports are like really on the cusp of kind of taking off into being very big. And I don't know that people appreciate it yet, like in the way that women's tennis is, because of the way that men's sports in college, besides football, are going to get smaller because the really good ones are just going to skip to the pros. And that's true, because with NIL now, like girls basketball, like the good girls can stay around for 4 years and build a relationship with communities and all that. And so I do think it's on the cusp. But it feels like the NCAA has like utterly failed these athletes in like a million ways. So anyway, I was just wondering what your big takeaways were from your kind of review of all that.
So first big takeaway, we hired an economist to do the analysis. It was exactly what you just said, was that, one of the arguments for not having equal treatment for the Final Four was that men earned so much more and it was so much more valuable. Yeah. And I finally, when we got assigned to do this, I was like, we just need to know the truth. I don't know what the truth is. Yeah. I'm not an economist, but I'm hiring economists to tell me the truth. And this guy did an analysis, and he concluded exactly what you said, that the growth potential for women's sport, women's basketball and other, is just ginormous. And it's not being exploited, and the TV contracts alone are worth a fortune, and that the NCAA has to pay a lot more attention to that. The contract's up for renewal, I think, in a year, and they are paying attention to it. So that's good. And there's a lot more money that's going to be coming in. So basically the way the NCAA was divided up, it was men's basketball and then everything else. And it was kind of nuts to just have a men's basketball contract and then everything else is part of one contract. So I think that's all going to get divided up, and the NCAA is going to get a lot more money, and that's a good thing. And second of all, and this was the year they had the Final Four during COVID. Right. So the men are in Indianapolis, the women are in Texas. And just stupid, I mean, I don't know how else to put it, just stupid stuff. Like the men were getting like steak and lobster buffet dinners, and the women were getting dinners that looked like what you'd get on a plane.
Yeah, in
with
jail.
a little bit of, and not even a lot of food, like a little bit of salad. Like, it was crazy. And I don't think, again, it was intentional. I just think it was the way men were seen as the kind of the premier brand. But obviously that's not okay. And so we pointed out a whole bunch of different things. It's my understanding that much of it has already been corrected.
Yeah, I think there's going to be real progress on that front. Did you look at all into the pay for the kid, or had NIL not happened yet when you did the report?
And I know had just been passed, but had not yet out.
Yeah, there's the big drama for the girls' sports now among NIL is pretty girl privilege, which is like you know, on Instagram you can do. It's like my whole thing. If you get brought back to do another review, is like they need to figure out a way to divide the pie. They're like making too much money to not divide the pie a little bit better. This is Bernie, Socialist Tim, former Republican Socialist Tim is coming out a little bit.
Because fortunately there's no pretty girl NIL in the law.
Yeah, so. I think you had done pretty good. Robbie, this has been so marvelous. What my final question for you is, you've just been a dog on the bone with Donald Trump since 2016. So I think maybe what we connected over, you know, I was maybe a little more complicit than you, but you had to have the life change. We're like, we got to beat this fucking guy. It's now about 8 years later. It's still going. These cases are going to go, he's going to have the election in 24, but these cases are going to go into 25. Once he's finally whether it's jail or just not presidenting or whatever, are you moving to the Hamptons? Do you get to retire and take a break? Do you have do you see a light at the end of the tunnel in the post-Trump world? Or are you just focused on just squeezing him for every penny he's got first, and then we'll see what happens?
Fortunately, we have too many problems. How many of us thought, I grew up in the 80s, I'm older than you, and I never thought during the Reagan years that I would be living in historic time. I really did. I thought, like, we were going to have bandies, music, and, like, there would be gay rights, that would be good. But it was, generally, everything was going to be relatively normal. Yeah. I don't think we're living in normal times, frankly. And I think there's just too much work to do. Even once Trump is finally defeated, which I think will happen, the danger of social media that we touched on earlier is petrifying. And something has to be done about it. You can't have, to give just one example, young girls starving themselves to death because of Instagram. That's just insane. And so, like, I kind of was born to be a fighter. So as far as I know, probably my family's not happy about this, but I'm going to keep on fighting.
I love you, Robbie. Thank you so much for taking the time. You're so busy. You've been very generous with your time. Get back out there. Just kind of squeeze that motherfucker. Take his money. We appreciate you. We're all grateful to you. And I hope to see you next time I'm through New York.
Thanks so much. Take care, Tim.